Back in the 1990s, Squaresoft was synonymous with Nintendo, all thanks to this little guy here. They both gave us some great games that literally changed the industry, and it all culminated in one of the best collaborative efforts of all time, Super Mario RPG. You might have heard of it. Recently, it got a remake. Back when I was Pugweenee Jr., there were two game series I played non-stop, Mario and Final Fantasy, and Square took both of them and mashed them together. So this game was literally perfectly tailored for me. And now it's probably my overall favorite video game of all time. I played the original at least 50 times, maybe more. I've lost count at this point. After this incredible game came out, we got to witness one of the sloppiest breakups in the video game industry. Nintendo and Square went their separate ways. Although both of their futures shone bright, there were too many differing business and technology decisions that were being made that they just couldn't come together the same way they used to. Squaresoft started exclusively making games for the new Sony console, the PlayStation. As far as Mario RPGs go, Nintendo kept making them. We got them in the forms of paper and pixels. Beautiful pixels. Even though Square had a stellar time during the PS1 era, due to some weird financial decisions, they were actually very desperately hurting for money. In the early 2000s, a bunch of internal changes started to happen, including a merger with Enix in 2003. Now, they are Square Enix, so I will be referring to them as that from now on. The writing was on the wall. Square Enix needed Nintendo's console audience to help them climb out of this self-inflicted recession. After almost a decade, a brand new Final Fantasy game came out on a Nintendo system, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles for Nintendo GameCube. Okay, so technically this isn't a mainline FF game, but it was the first new one in a really long time. FFCC is a game that I really love, and back then we all thought maybe it could serve as a gateway for potential future Final Fantasy crossovers, like Super Mario RPG. Also, I should clarify, when I say Super Mario RPG is a Final Fantasy crossover, I mean that in the same way you might consider the Kingdom Hearts games as Final Fantasy crossovers. It's Mario with Final Fantasy elements. Literally. Look, there are the 4 crystal elements right there. Now that they are back to friendship status, how many more Mario RPG games have they made together? None. Actually, there hasn't been another new mainline numerical Final Fantasy game released on a Nintendo console, minus the ports of course. But what if I told you there are in fact 2 Mario Cross Final Fantasy games made by Square Enix? They aren't what you think though. It's b-ball, and a handful of other sports, but most importantly, b-ball.
Mario Hoops 3-on-3
for Nintendo DS.
Mario Sports Mix
for Nintendo Wii. Mario sports games? With Final Fantasy? Okay, kind of bizarre, but I'm listening. I'm a pretty open-minded person. Square Enix is a JRPG juggernaut, but they had made sports games before. Well, they had games that featured sports in them, like Final Fantasy X and Blitzball, which, if you've played 10, you either love or hate Blitzball. There is no in between. Final Fantasy X is an RPG first though, and Blitzball is pretty much a significant but optional minigame. Fortunately, based on what I have seen of both Hoops and Sports Mix, they look like entirely original sports-based video games, since they are first and foremost games about sports. So all the focus is on making the sports fun and play well, I'd imagine. Confession time. I played Hoops back in the day, but I'm gonna be honest, I have never even heard of Sports Mix. The cover looks like an image that would be printed on the side of a piñata in your local grocery store. It looks safe and sterile. Compare this box art to Mario Strikers Charged, another Mario sports game that came out on the Wii. Also, there are no references to Final Fantasy or its characters on either cover. Like, I get it, it's a Mario game first, but you couldn't like put a Moogle on the side or something? If you put both Mario and Final Fantasy together on the box, wouldn't that help reach a wider audience? Wouldn't that help make more money? Including both properties on the box and advertising it as a basketball crossover would make it unique. Well, unique in a video game format. It seems like b-ball and crossovers are kind of a winning formula. Okay, maybe not every time. The first one rules, though. Those are movies and these are games, so it could be different, right? Hell, this isn't even the first time Mario has been ballin'.
This game is like an award-winning show.
Actually, NBA Street V3 came out a year before Hoops 3-on-3. I wonder if Square Enix was inspired by it. Originally, I wanted to talk about these games chronologically, so Hoops 3-on-3 first and then Sports Mix. However, I have decided I want to talk about Mix first, then Hoops. And I think once I actually do, you'll understand why. Alright, time to mix sports. The music is phenomenal. If you are familiar with Square Enix, you know that they don't mess around when it comes to soundtracks. Just check out the Mario RPG soundtrack, for instance. Just like Mario Galaxy, it seems like some of this game's music was recorded by a live orchestra, which was a really big deal at the time. This game runs super smooth, and the textures and all of the models look fantastic. I just want to take a moment to bask in this Wii game goodness. For some reason, and I don't think I can actually pinpoint what it is, but something about how certain Wii games look and sound feel timeless. Wii Sports Resort is a great example of this. And honestly, I would consider Sports Mix to be in that category too. In this game you have some different modes, including tournament and exhibition, as well as some party games, which are just spin-offs of the sports that you can play. Speaking of which, there are 4 different sports included. There are cutscenes that introduce them to you after you've selected which tournament you want to play. So, a Final Fantasy brand meteor crashed into the Mushroom Kingdom, huh? 4 toads investigate and find 4 Final Fantasy brand crystals with different sports memorabilia encased within. Alright, so here are the toads. Let's take a look at these sports. We have b-ball, volleyball, dodgeball, and coin. Coin? Why is the hockey puck a coin? Look, I get it. It's Mario. It's all about the theming. Regardless, getting hit in the face with a solid golden coin hockey puck would break your teeth. And there are a lot of big teeth in this game. Okay, I'm willing to forgive though, because my boy Blue Toad came up with the idea, and I made him in Mario 3D World and Wonder. So, I'm proud of him. He's so creative. Also, when I saw the dodgeball in this game, I thought,
hey, that don't look like the one from my school.
But then, I did some research. In America, when you think of a dodgeball, you probably think of those rubber balls that make this noise. In Japan, however, it looks like dodgeballs are built more like volleyballs. For further proof of this, we can look at the dodgeball series developed by River City Ransom Studio, Technos Japan, specifically Super Dodgeball. As someone who has been hit with both ball variants, I can say, if you play dodgeball with a volleyball, you're hardcore. Tournament is where most of this game happens. The brackets are set up to look like a Mario overworld, which is a nice touch. This is also where you unlock any Final Fantasy content. Besides unlocking the Moogle, which you get for completing any of the tournaments once, I decided I wanted to try to unlock one of the other Final Fantasy job class characters that appear in this game. From what I read online, it seems like unlocking these characters is pretty tedious, and I only have so much time I can work on each video, so I'm only going to be going for one. I ended up doing the basketball tournament, since I am emphasizing b-ball in this video. I will check out the other sports after though. Like I mentioned earlier, you actually get the Moogle pretty quickly in this game, after you complete your first tournament in fact. The issue is, you can't swap to it unless you're willing to restart the tournament and redo the Mushroom Cup. I am not willing to do that. After I unlocked my FF characters, I decided I would use them while sampling the other sporting selection. When I got to the menu, I realized that Moogle and Ninja weren't there. So, and this is really cool, you can only use the characters in the sport you unlocked them in. This is something I find very disrespectful. One thing I wanted to touch on is repetition. Square Enix was smart. They picked 4 different sports that can all be played virtually on the same court, minus an additional net here or there. After a while though, all of the sports start to mix together in my brain. Honestly, they even start to kind of play the same. I'm not kidding. I kept letting my brain wander off and use the right controls, but for the wrong sport. They really rely on you either mastering one at a time or having a great short-term memory to remember everything that you can do, which I don't have. I actually liked all 3, including basketball. Maybe if I wasn't playing them one after another, I would have enjoyed them more. The game came out on the Wii, so adding motion controls was kind of a necessity. I, for one, am not against motion controls at all. I know they are helpful in an accessibility way, and when done right, they can actually be a lot of fun. The issue I have with the motion controls is that they rely on that old Wii waggle instead of trying to implement motion controls in a creative way. Overall, I think Mario Sports Mix is a solid but safe sports game. And if you're planning to play it as just that, then I think you'll have at least a good time. However, if you are a fan of Final Fantasy, I have some bad news. Besides Ninja and the Moogle, unless you're willing to put a lot of time and effort into it, you're gonna have to dig deep to get to any more of that Final Fantasy soft and chewy goodness.
Welcome to basketball, Mario style. Mario Hoops 3-on-3 for Nintendo DS. Rated everyone.
This art style rules. I really like the character portraits a lot. Much like Sports Mix, Square Enix outdid themselves with the soundtrack. Actually, some of the songs from this game were redone for Sports Mix. The music isn't as rich as the Wii game, which makes sense given both audio formats, but it is fitting and it serves the game's aesthetic well. My favorite song in the game is the Character Select theme. Actually, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but is this the only game to feature Mario singing along in the soundtrack? Another fun fact, the composer for both games is Masayoshi Soken, who is the composer for Final Fantasy XIV and XVI, both of which have stellar soundtracks. Mario Hoops 3-on-3 is only a basketball game. If you'll remember the footage I showed of the basketball gameplay from Mario Sports Mix, you'll probably notice how similar they look in terms of layout, but how different they look in terms of style. And style is one of the biggest things carrying Mario Hoops 3-on-3. And I mean that as a compliment. This game has an attitude, and I really wish that Mario Sports Mix would have carried that over when making it. Now, before I get to the gameplay, let's talk Final Fantasy. I'd like to inform you that this game has much thicker representation. In Mario Sports Mix, there was only one court based on FF, which was an airship. It could have been Bowser's airship, but I'm gonna give him this one. Actually, combining a Final Fantasy airship with one of Bowser's would have been really cool. I wish they would have done that. In Mario Hoops 3-on-3, there are 3 courses based on Final Fantasy: Balborough Garden, Rainbow Airship, and Glare Desert. Just like in Sports Mix, the main game mode you'll be playing is the tournament, which is where you do most of the unlocking. As far as unlockable characters go, all of the same Final Fantasy characters are here. Besides them, there is a whole slew of Mario characters to unlock as well, including some fun ones like Dixie and a Fly Guy. you can unlock different color variants for the characters, but you can also unlock different basketballs. There are 17 of them. Mario Sports Mix really should have done something like this. Maybe they could have had a real hockey puck, and as you play through the game, one of the unlockables could be a coin, instead of having it be one from the very beginning. Now, let's talk about gameplay. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'm actually capturing the game footage for both games off of their original consoles. When I make videos, I want the most authentic experience I can get, especially for games on the Wii and on the DS. The reason I'm bringing this up is because in order to play Mario Hoops 3-on-3, you need to play it on the official hardware for the best result, in my opinion. From what I played of Hoops 3-on-3, I can gladly say I enjoyed it quite a bit. I really like how you can tap the touchscreen to dribble faster, which helps you collect coins from item boxes. I noticed when you tap around the touchpad, the ball will dribble in that direction from the character. This adds a lot of strategy on where you can keep your ball. This is way more involved than Sports Mix. I ended up playing the tournament, and to get to the Final Fantasy content, you just need to beat all 4 cups. Then you have a showdown upon a Final Fantasy brand airship with the 3 job class characters in the game: White Mage, Black Mage, and Ninja. I really like how their special moves look like limit breaks. Apparently, you can change the controls to be buttons only with no touchpad, but I think that kind of defeats the entire point, so I decided to only play with the D-pad and stylus, the way it was meant to be played. Even though the controls aren't inherently for me, I was still willing to try to learn them to play this game. That's how good it is in my opinion. And once I started to get the hang of them, I was having a lot of fun trying out harder moves. And because I only had to worry about learning the fundamentals of b-ball, I felt less overwhelmed trying to remember everything, like how you had to in Sports Mix. I honestly think focusing on one sport here was the right move. That way, they could work really hard on getting it right. Hoops is a smaller game in terms of scope. It has 1 sport, whereas Mix is a mix. It has 4. So yes, technically Mix does have more, but I think it's spread too thin. I think that Sports Mix should have maybe been a direct sequel to Mario Hoops 3-on-3. It could have been called like Mario Sports 3-on-3, maybe a collection of 3 different 3-on-3 sports. Mario Hoops has more content, unlockables, and modes, whereas Mix has tedious unlocks. I feel like my time is more respected with Hoops. Just like Space Jam 2, Mario Sports Mix has too much stuff in it, and it really bogs down the overall experience. One comparison I couldn't help but make in my head while playing was, Mario Hoops is like Mario Kart DS, and Sports Mix is like Mario Kart Wii. Does that make sense? It makes sense to me. Don't get me wrong, both of these games are good, but I feel like there are a lot of similar pros and cons for each. Maybe it's because one is portable and one is on home console. Like the portable option is always loaded with extra features and fun. Not to be a hater, but right now I'm not really a huge fan of the current line of Nintendo sports games. I didn't really like Switch Sports at all, and the recent Mario Sports titles have been kinda meh. The golf one was fun, but I had to play that game without my glasses on to make it look good. I would welcome a Mario Sports title by Square Enix again with open arms. Technically, there is one final crossover. In November of 2015, Final Fantasy VII's Cloud Strife was announced as a fighter joining Super Smash Bros. For Wii and 3DS. I remember watching this Nintendo Direct live in my dorm room, and like a couple of seconds into the trailer, I immediately knew who it was, and I accidentally screamed when I realized. Someone else in the building heard me, and they called my RA to come do a wellness check on me.
The gamer in me had taken over.
One fun fact about Cloud joining Smash is that this was the first time Mario got to share screen time with a named Final Fantasy protagonist. In the follow-up game, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Sephiroth and Sora also joined. One fun thing about Sora is that he is the product of Kingdom Hearts, the infamous Disney Final Fantasy crossover, and he got to meet Mario, who also got to have his own Final Fantasy crossover. Did you also know that Kingdom Hearts was originally supposed to be a platformer to rival Mario? Square Enix can be so weird. I love them. Sometimes. Nowadays, Mario does sports with Sonic. He probably doesn't even remember meeting Black Mage. Or Cactar.
Cactar.
Coming from a Final Fantasy fan, a Final Fan-tassie? Final Fantasy? Coming from a fan of Final Fantasy, it really is cool seeing a Cactar, a Moogle, and all these job class characters hanging out with Mario and co. It really was fun revisiting Hoops and playing Sports Mix for the first time. I really do hope we get to see some new crossover projects between Square Enix and Nintendo in the future. And maybe with all this positive reception that the Super Mario RPG Remake has been getting, we might even get a sequel to that someday. Both games were eventually ported to the Wii U. Actually, most of the game crossovers I talked about in this video are on the Wii U. So, if you want to check any of them out, I'm sure you can just download them on there. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I've actually wanted to make a video about Super Mario RPG for a really long time, so I decided to not do that and make it about b-ball and sports instead. But I promise if you do subscribe, I'll make a real SMRPG video someday. Let me know in the comments what you thought about Hoops and Sports Mix, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And if you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy some of the ones that are on screen now. I'll see you in the next one.